Hello, Cardinals. How are you? Today we're going to talk about water resistance. Okay, so we're going to do something with watercolor, and watercolor is water, right? So we're going to do watercolor resistance. And what's neat about this is you can draw with a waxy medium and then paint over it, and it makes this really neat effect with your art, because I know we're limited to some of the supplies that we have. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this water resistant. If you go to Walmart and get a little watercolor deck, you can use your watercolor deck to do this project, or you can soak a marker in a little tiny bit of water overnight, an old marker, not one of your good ones, and it'll bleed out what's left in the marker, and you can use that as your watercolor. So hopefully for this project you have what you need to do this. So I bled out a marker, and I have my little watercolor here in this little bucket that I'm going to use. And if you have a little watercolor set, you can use that as well. But remember, whenever you're using watercolor, the first word, it's like an ingredient on a recipe, is water, yes? So you must have a lot of water in order to move the paint across the paper. If your brush is very dry, then it's not going to move the paint. It's just going to drag a dry brush across the paper. So you have to make sure that you have a lot of water on your brush, or you have to dip your brush frequently into the water and the paint, and you might have to add water, but you have to have a lot of water in order to move it. If you rub it too hard on the paper, you're going to put a hole in it. So it's a very fine balance how to get the water to move across the paper. Luckily, I have watercolor paper, but if you don't, you can also use cardstock. But you do need something a little bit thicker than regular paper. If you don't have this paper and you don't have the paint, then just draw the art, and you can do that much. But if you do, you can do the whole project of watercolor. So I don't know if you can see the turtle that I have on the board here, but I have a turtle and I have a fish. Here is my fish. I don't know if you can see it. I cannot tell what you can see and what you cannot see, but I drew a fish. Do you see that? So my first and second graders, they're gonna draw a fish, and my third and fourth and fifth graders are gonna draw a turtle. The fifth graders, in order for you to do the watercolor resist, you almost have to have those crayons that screw out of the little crayon thing, because you have to draw with it like a pencil to put your color on yours and put the wash on. If not, just use colored pencils or markers, fifth graders, and at least draw the turtle. And you don't have to worry about the water resist part. But I love drawing sea critters, and so I thought this would be a fun one to do, and if you have all the tools to do the water resistant part, you can. What I'm telling everybody that's coming to school is, at this point, you should have a few more supplies than you've had in the past. So I would go and get a glue stick, a pair of scissors, I would get a ruler, some colored pencils, some markers, and some crayons, so that you can do a few extra things with me, because now we're just past drawing and we're going to get into some other things, and you're going to need a few things. And those watercolor sets are $1.97 at Walmart, okay? And they look like this, and they're great to use, okay? All right, so I'm going to turn off my overhead so that it's not blaring in my face now that you can see the turtle. And what we're going to do is we're going to watch the little video that I supplied for you guys on turtles and learn a little bit about the sea turtle, because they're super interesting and they're almost prehistoric. They're so old, and it's amazing that they have survived as long as they have, because they are the lowest animal on the food chain. They're the slowest. They have a lot of predators after them. And these sea turtles have to lay a lot of eggs. And out of 150 eggs a year that they lay, or something like that, maybe 5 of them make it to adulthood. Some of them can live to be almost 80 years old. And in South Padre and North Padre, they have a conservation group that helps to help their eggs get to the ocean. So they put big nets out and they protect the little babies as they're hatching so that they can get to the ocean and the seagulls don't get them. Once they get to the ocean, they have to combat the waves and they have to hide from predators. Once their shell gets nice and hard, they can protect themselves a little better, but when they're young and their shell is forming, that is when it's the most critical and when most of them sadly become somebody's lunch. Okay, so since my first and second graders already drew a turtle with the Jean-Michel Basquiat project, that's why you guys are going to draw a fish. So I've got some little helpful drawings to help you step by step draw the turtles and the fish. So the first thing I want you to do is you're going to get about a half a piece of an 8 by 11 paper and fold it in half, because you don't need the whole paper. You need a half a paper today. But you need to draw your fish or your turtle very large on your paper. So this is what I see a lot in class. If you can see, people drawing a little fish like this. That's not very fun to paint because there's nothing on the paper, right? So if you're going to draw a fish or a turtle, you're going to follow the steps. So my first graders are going to look at the little steps on the fish, and they're going to draw a frowny face, a smiley face. They're going to add a mouth. They're going to give it a fin. They're going to do the top fins and the bottom fins, and they're going to add some little details on their fish, right? And then they're going to have a fish. But the fish needs to be the size of your paper, yeah? If you want to go back and add like a little coral plant or something in your drawing, you can. A coral is sort of an organic line that just sort of does that and has a few little circles in it, and it'll look like a little coral reef that's down there in the ocean with your fish or your turtle, okay? So on your turtle, I drew my turtle really large so that he looks like he's falling off the paper. And I also did his turtle shell pretty realistic. But if you don't want to do a realistic turtle shell, you can draw circles in your shell, whatever you want to do. But what I always do is draw my drawing first. Then the second thing I do is I outline it with my crayons or my oil pastels. So I'm going to outline my whole turtle. The interesting thing that I did with this one today was I outlined it with white, and then I came back with bright, bright colors and colored it. I outlined my coral in purple, did some pink dots, and then came back and lightly colored my coral, and now it's ready for my watercolor resistant. If you don't have the watercolor, just get this far. But you're going to put as much color as you can on your turtle, and then you're going to give it some texture. So once you've drawn your turtle, and you've outlined your turtle, and you've colored your turtle, then I want you to come back on top with the darker crayon, and I want you to give the turtle some texture. So I'm adding some squares on my turtle. And if you want to do this first, before you color it, you can also do that. But the more texture and the more interesting lines you put on the turtle, the cooler he's going to look when you go to color him with the watercolor wash. So you want to add a lot of details and a lot of neat, interesting lines on your turtle so that he looks really cool. So if you colored him real lightly, then you're going to come back now and you're going to add some texture to your turtle so that he's got a lot of fun lines going on him. Maybe you put some scales on his head or something like that, little circles. They have this texture on them in real life that kind of looks like little circles, okay? So I just think the more texture you can add to your shell, the neater it's gonna look. Because if you don't add a lot of texture to it when you color it, it's gonna just get washed out with the watercolor wash. So you want to be sure and spend a lot of time on this part. Draw a really neat turtle, put a lot of detail and lines and, you know, just texture. So I don't know if you remember when I drew the fish with one color, how we came back and we added texture on top of the fish after we colored it with one color, right? We did all of this with one color in their monochromatic lesson. So you're gonna put as many bright, vibrant colors on this turtle as you can. Don't paint him brown, because that's gonna be really boring. We're not doing a realistic turtle. We're doing a bright, colorful, abstract turtle, okay? Or fish, all right? Once you get him all the way colored, you're gonna take the water that you made with your marker, and you're gonna get some kind of a little brush, okay? The last thing I'm gonna have is a paper towel, so I'm gonna run grab one real quick. Hold on, I'm coming right back. Okay, because you're gonna need this part, okay? So I'm gonna take my watercolor. I hope everyone can see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna take my watercolor wash, and I have a wax on my paper because crayons and oil pastels are made with wax. So water resists the wax. So we're gonna take our watercolor and we're gonna go over the entire top part of the drawing. I'm gonna lay it flat on the board so it's easier for me to paint, and then I'll show it to you up close again. Can you see what I'm doing? So we're gonna put this watercolor wash all over the entire top surface of this paper. And I don't know if you can see, but I've got a lot of water on my brush. So if you're using the watercolor deck, then be sure and just dip your brush in the water a lot, even after you've dipped it in the paint, because you need more water than you need paint, because that's what moves the paint, right? So if you can see the white, you can see the white crayon coming through that I colored with, so you understand now why you have to have a lot of color and why you have to have a lot of texture on this turtle or fish before you do the wash, because if you don't, you're just gonna lose your drawing. So you really need to spend a lot of time with your oil pastels. Once you get it all the way done, you're going to blot all the extra water off the paper. Yes, and if you want to, you can even take a little bit of salt. And I'm gonna take just a tiny little pinch of salt down here. And I'm gonna lay it flat, and I'm gonna put the salt where the bubbles are, and I'm gonna let it just sit on the paper. And it's gonna make a really cool effect when you get finished, and make it look like there's bubbles in the water. And that is a watercolor resistant painting. So I hope you guys have fun with this. Be sure and put a lot of color in your fish and a lot of color in your turtle before you put the wash on top, because animals in the ocean are very colorful and beautiful and bright, and they can camouflage themselves sometimes, but most of them are very beautiful. So make yours very beautiful. Give it a lot of texture by adding lines and squares and circles. Color all the lines and squares and circles different colors. Add a lot of features. I could have even put more texture on my coral and then paint it. As you can see, I outlined this one in white, and I hope you have a lot of fun with this. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.